Welcome back to part 4 of the history and evolution of the MMORPG genre, the present and future. This is section 1, The Elder Scrolls Online. Without a doubt, the MMORPG genre is known as a primarily PC-exclusive genre. The sheer size of these games made it necessary that they be played on a device with the memory and capabilities to run these games. Before the PS2, MMOs on console wasn't possible. Final Fantasy XI was an MMORPG that was played on PC and PS2, as long as the PS2 had an extended hard drive peripheral as well as a connection to a modem. However, now, with the development of technology, it's become more and more common for new MMOs to be released with either separate servers for the PC and consoles, or, more and more commonly, cross-platform servers that allow everyone to play together. This includes games like Final Fantasy XIV, my personal favorites, Phantasy Star Online 2, Neverwinter, DC Universe Online, Star Trek Online, Black Desert Online, and the two focuses of Part 4, Elder Scrolls Online and Bless Unleashed. This is the last part of my exploration of the MMORPG genre's history, looking at what makes an MMORPG, and what each addition to this genre of video games takes from its predecessors, and what ideas it explores to make it unique. So, in my mind, it's safe to say that a good majority of people who play video games know what Skyrim is. When Skyrim came out, it was so popular that Bethesda kept releasing it again and again for every console, it seems. It got ridiculous. Nonetheless, it was popular, and, a lot like Blizzard did with Warcraft, Bethesda's parent company tasked ZeniMax Online Studios to turn the incredibly popular Elder Scrolls series into an MMORPG, and on April 4th, 2014, at least for PC, and June 9th, 2015 for consoles, they released Elder Scrolls Online, or as it's known on the internet, ESO. It plays like an Elder Scrolls game with MMO characteristics thrown in. I'd now like to read this excerpt from the June 2012 edition of Game Informer that reported on the game after it was announced. The Elder Scrolls Online is set approximately 1,000 years before the events of Skyrim, well before the ascendancy of the Septim Dynasty in the Third Era. During this era, the land of Tamriel has no clear ruler. The Imperials are weakened from previous wars, and the central province of Cyrodiil is marked by constant warfare. 3 distinct alliances, each consisting of 3 of the playable races, maintain huge standing armies to defend their holdings and expand their territory. Each fights continual battles against the hated Imperials and their other neighbors. However, the noble Tharn family is hatching a plot to bring Tamriel back under the Imperial heel. They've forged a dark pact with the King of Worms, Manny Marco, an Altmer necromancer who promises to fuel the flagging Imperial war machine by reanimating the bodies of fallen soldiers. Unknown to the Imperials he supposedly serves, however, Manny Marco is scheming with the Daedric Prince of Domination, Molag Bal, to bring the mortal realm under the Dark Lord's dominion. The heroic fantasy story explores these world-threatening events from the point of view of an adventurer whose soul has already been stolen by Molag Bal. This provides a convenient in-fiction rationale for being able to come back from death over and over again. To get your soul back, you must save Tamriel as well. I would highly recommend reading the entire article if you can find it. It's a really great read. ESO has gained 4 expansions since then, with each one opening the game more, to the point where this last expansion released has opened the entire country of Skyrim to play. Now let's throw ESO into the KEBQ system and see what we learn. The KEBQ system is something I came up with as my way of seeing if an MMORPG has everything that an MMORPG needs as established by its predecessors. The KEBQ system covers all these sections. Character, covering player customization options and what makes the player feel immersed. Economy, which covers if there is a player-driven economy in-game. Dungeons, which analyzes what PvE content, or player versus environment content, is available in-game. Bosses examines if there's unique enemies in the game, either in the open world or at the end of dungeons, that provide extra challenges or experiences. Competition covers if there's any PvP content. Endgame is what is there to do after hitting level cap, and world basically analyzes if the game is a persistent world, meaning that the entire thing is loaded and a player can walk from one end of the country to the other without any loading screens, or instance, where there is loading screens separating semi-large areas. The first section is character. All the races that players have been able to play as in previous Elder Scrolls games are present in ESO, which equals up to 10 races. The player race decides which alliance they are a part of for PvP, and there are 3. As for classes, there were 6 that the player could choose from, although there are multiple ways to play those classes, and multiple weapons that those classes can use. As for the immersion factor, being a being without a soul, it allows the player to get to places mortals can't go to, as well as other feats like literal time travel. Also, like the Elder Scrolls games, the NPCs will remember the player's accomplishments and treat the player differently depending on what they have done. On to economy. To accommodate the crafting system of Skyrim into an MMO, the player economy had to change slightly from the norm. Crafting works almost exactly as it does in Skyrim, with players being able to use any crafting station and build up skills by crafting more and more. The way that players sell to each other is through guild stores. When joining a guild, players are then able to sell from that guild's store, which are set up in any town the guild chooses. This gives incentive to join guilds and keeps from a crowded sales board that everyone shops from, and to replace it with stores that serve the players that are around the specific town. This could be bad if the store is in an out-of-the-way area, but it gives a sense of realism that's usually not seen in an MMO. Next up is dungeons. And ESO uses the Big 3 format that is standard for the genre, that being tank, DPS, and healer. Along with the setup of dungeons is also classic, with a linear path broken up with enemies and bosses. Speaking of bosses, ESO continues the tradition of having named monsters running around the overworld to kill, and quests, dungeons, and raids have bosses in them, although because of how the Elder Scrolls combat is designed, the strategy is mostly avoiding attack areas that are put on the ground for players to see, and being able to block or dodge the attacks at the right time. Besides that, hammering on the boss with all of your skills is pretty much the standard strategy. Moving on to competition, PvP is pretty standard, with the Cyrodiil area being the area where the 3 factions have large-scale fights, taking objectives and territory in giant groups. Outside of that, certain areas in the game allow players of different factions to fight in open combat. There are also quicker PvP contents that pit groups against each other. But overall, PvP isn't the focus of ESO. As for endgame, the endgame of ESO consists of large player versus environment raids to complete, as well as crafting for the player's guild housing. There's also enough content scattered around the world that nobody should ever not have something to do, and seeing as ESO allows players to level up different skills just by participating in that skill, it leaves a lot to finish. Finally, we'll talk about the world. Like in Final Fantasy XIV, EverQuest 2, and the Secret World, this game operates on large areas separated by load screens, and smaller areas like dungeons, delves, and raids that are also in their own instance. These areas are large enough to where there are multiple towns and multiple things to do in each, but they're not as big as, say, the area of World of Warcraft or Lord of the Rings Online. Welcome to the section where we talk about the user interface and the game's play feel. In the Elder Scrolls Online, it doesn't have the common mini-map that all the other MMORPGs we've been looking at have. Instead, it has this bar at the top of the screen, and that bar shows which direction we're facing in, and any icons for quests or other locations that might be of interest. That being said, at least on controller, you can press a button and bring up a more detailed map that you can then zoom in on and look at places that you've discovered. Crucially, unlike in the other MMOs, or at least some of the other MMOs, that showed where you could pick up quests automatically, this one you actually have to find them, and if they're blacked out like that is, the Crestshade Mine, it's something that we haven't done yet, much like the Doomcrag, whereas other things that we have finished, like this Crestshade icon, they're fully white to show that they're completed. Now on the PC, the movement is probably the same with the WASD keys and the mouse controls, but this game is being played on my PlayStation 4 and therefore uses controls that are a little bit more akin to Elder Scrolls. You move around with the left stick, move the camera with the right stick, and you can fight using the trigger keys, either blocking with L2 or fight or swinging with R2. Now, the way that this is made more into an MMO standard is by having skills that you can choose, like right down there on the bottom. Obviously, because I'm not using a mouse and keyboard, I can't click on them. Instead, they are mapped to certain face buttons, like triangle or circle. You can also use the L1 and R1. This game allows you to equip two main hand weapons so that you can switch between them, like between my sword here and my staff, and you can equip different skills based on those skill trees. And speaking of skill trees, the way that skills are handled in Elder Scrolls Online is also a lot like Skyrim, where if you find skills, you can then upgrade them, like we see with the Ardent Flame and Draconic Power trees. And the more you use them, the more you level them up, and the more that you can put your skill points into them. Items are also handled a lot like how Skyrim was, where we have these giant menus that we go to the different areas to find what's in our bags. There isn't any bag extension except for the crafting bag extension that you get for being a subscriber. That allows you to put crafting material in there and not jam up your inventory. Classes in the Elder Scrolls Online are still the common trope of tanks, DPS, and healers. Although because you can set up how your character is based on what they can wield and what they can equip in the class menu, you can set up these classes with a wide range of things. Like, I can carry this big two-handed greatsword, but I can also have this staff. I can also use like sword and shields or other equipment. One thing that I forgot to mention is that you can go into first person just like in every other Elder Scrolls game. And I know this is a way a lot of people like to play. I prefer to play in third person because it lets me keep an eye on more enemies and what they're doing. But you can just as easily play this way. And on to our last section in this a little bit is what it is like to talk to NPCs. So let me put this up and go talk to her over here. Talk to them just like you would, and just like in Skyrim and Elder Scrolls, it takes you to a screen like this, where you hear the NPC talk, and then you can answer back. These little mini cutscenes make it a little bit better for the player to, feel connected to whoever they're talking to, and feel like the questions and they're answering make them a bigger part to the story overall. And in some cases, you can even choose what your character would say, whether that be intimidating or charming or denying or confirming what the NPC is asking you. All in all, it's a pretty good system. Now, what did ESO do for the MMORPG genre? I actually think that lies with how it handles the way it makes money. Basically, a new player must buy the base game and the latest expansion to play. However, after that, they can play almost all the content forever. There is a currency that can be bought for real money, but the only thing that can be purchased on the store is small DLCs that unlock small additional quest lines and dungeons, extra stuff that's not necessary to complete the game. There is an optional $10 subscription, but this just unlocks additional quality of life features, like a backpack that holds all of your crafting gear. For the most part, the game is completely open to the player after the first initial payment. And I believe this is a far more approachable business model that more MMORPGs should try and implement. Another unique feature that I haven't talked about yet is ESO's proximity chat. Basically, what this means is that if you have a mic on, anyone within a certain radius can hear what you're saying. I see this used a lot in towns and with role-playing characters that are trying to go for a more immersive experience. It's a cool little feature, and I would like to see it used more in other MMOs, seeing as the chat feature doesn't really work all that well with console unless you're using a keyboard plugged into your console, which just takes up another USB slot. Outside of that, ESO does implement a lot of things that other MMOs do, just with the Elder Scrolls shine on it. It seems like a no-brainer that a game like Skyrim would make a good MMORPG, but the team at ZeniMax went above and beyond to make it an excellent game. In the next and final video, we'll be looking at a newer game called Bless Unleashed that also is played on consoles. Interestingly, this one is played exclusively on consoles. It doesn't have a PC version yet, although it is an adaptation of an old PC game called Bless Online. I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you'll continue on to watch the last video in this 4-part series. Again, thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you, like and subscribe, and goodbye.